All right, whenever you're ready.
Aloha everyone. We're here at Pono Grown Farm on the island of Maui. We're up in Makawao, Olinda actually, the area above Makawao town at about 2,100 feet, growing vegetables and fruit trees and some chickens and bees. And we're also growing seed, part of the Hawai'i Seed Growers Network, so we use this site to grow seed crops. We'll talk more about it through the weekend. But one of our seed crops that we grow here is Pigeon Pea. We're actually here in our food forest here, which is also in tandem a little bit of a seed stock, mostly of different perennial crops that we grow in the food forest. But we have the annual Pigeon Pea that we planted around all our fruit trees, about four trees around all the fruit trees as nurse trees when the trees were really small and the blasting wind and rain, and so it provided some shade and mulch, nitrogen fixation for them. This is a Yamagata avocado tree, maybe about 4 years old or so. We're going to harvest some pigeon pea today. In addition to other stuff, we're going to go over seed cleaning. So coming in and looking at these seeds, what I'm looking for is really dried out. And it's kind of hard to tell on a video screen, but this one here is a little bit green and soft. And if I open up the seed, it's likely to still be a little bit green. So, I mean, it is purple, but it's not dried out. It's juicy. You can see that like shine on it, that golden shine. I can break right into it, and I got like a nice juicy pea. So this one is not ready. But most of the ones on here are a lot drier. Generally, I can kind of do the rattle test, and if I can, hear some rattling, so we're kind of more ready to go. These are also maybe a little bit more green than I like them, but they are, you can see, dried out. They don't have that same shine on them. I can't break into it. I can squeeze it, but I can't break into it. So I'm trying to. So it's a nice hard bean there. And so these are the ones we're going for that are ready, but because this plant has some that aren't fully ready, I'm gonna jump on over here to a plant that is a bit more rattly. And I'm gonna go with these. And I'm just gonna take pruning of the plant so that it can resprout itself. Got some rattles there. Come on over here. And here we got some really nice rattly pigeon pea going on. Take a branch of that. For today we're going to do a little demo on the pigeon pea cleaning and some other vegetable crops that we're working with. All right, let's head back to the harvest shed and clean some seed. Alright, here we are in our harvest shed, and I want to show y'all the screens that we work with for seed cleaning. And this is for dried seed cleaning. We're mostly going to focus on dried seed cleaning. We'll do a little bit of tomatoes at the end, so you'll see a little bit of a process of working with wet seeds. Wet seed crops such as squash or cucumber, tomatoes, eggplant are some examples, peppers of wet seed crops. But dry seed crops are seed that dry on the plant. This is a Tulsi basil. Here it passes that rattle test. And so on the plant it dries. And what we tend to do is we tend to try and have our seed dry on the plant in the sun. On some nice like warm days is when we come in and harvest seed. And generally, our main seed time of year is in the winter, is in the summertime, in our dry months, when we get about 4 months, 5 months of like really dry weather. In the winter we can get pretty inundated with water. And seed can actually mold on the plant. So we tend to focus all of our seed saving in the summertime. And then what we use to process the seed is these screens. We get these at High Mowing Seeds. It's a little kit that they make the frames, they make the screens. You can definitely make your own. There is a limitation on screen sizes, so even if you make your own, you could actually order these screens from High Mowing Seeds, just the screens themselves, or other places that you might find. If you're on the mainland, it's going to be even easier to find screen. Here in Hawaii, we're kind of limited to screens and hardware cloth sizes. So I found it best to get these screens because they all come in different sizes. So based on the size of seed that we work with is the size of screen that we're gonna utilize. And I'll give you a better picture as to what it looks like to work with these screens once we get this Tulsi seed ready. So this Tulsi is also, it's available on Hawaii Seed Growers Network. We grow it as a mulch plant, we grow it for teas, we grow it as forage for the bees, and it's just a beautiful plant, beautiful like bush, grows up about 6 feet tall or so, is really abundant, and leaves are nice and soft, and they taste really good and have really good medicinal qualities to them. And the way that we process this, we kind of took this off of the bush the same way that we take the pigeon pea off. And the first thing we do is we thresh it. Is this word for vigorously banging seed. And it's a pretty cool process because this is the exact same way all of our ancestors were cleaning seed for the foods that we currently eat today. Was through harvesting them in this way and threshing them. Very simple grassroots process, easy to do, low tech. And basically what I'm doing is I'm bagging the seed out of these holes. And you can see here there's some green on here because I took a whole bush. So there's some green that's not going to have a viable seed. And then there's a lot of brown in there. And it's the brown that we're threshing the seed out of the holes. Another way people might prefer is they can actually get in there and massage it and twist and just kind of play around with it. So it really depends on what the seed is that you're harvesting, what the method is going to be to get the seed out of there. And I'm using a bin. Some people use paper bags is commonly used, or they'll put this in a paper bag and they'll let it store because the paper bag could absorb some of the moisture from the plant. And then the seed is nice and easy to get out of the paper bag, or sometimes even people will hang up these plants and let them dry out even more through time before they come in and they process. As I mentioned, for me it's like I want them to get nice and dry on the plant itself, and then I can come in and harvest it in that dry mode, and it makes it much easier to process if we have that ability with the dry weather, which some of us aren't in a place that the weather can be that predictable. So you just have to figure out what's best for your environment. All right. So I think I got enough for demonstration purposes. You can see in the bin you have a mixture of seed and you have a mixture of plant material. And what's easy for me to do is I can see if I have a bowl I can transfer to. So I'm going to move this to a bowl. One thing that's important is that the materials you're working with are clean and that there's no other seed in there. Like if I had used this bin for another seed that was a small seed and it had some seed left in it, then now I'd have contaminated seed, which wouldn't go so well when I'm planting basil and suddenly I find I'm getting something else. Or maybe it would. Maybe it'd be a happy surprise, but definitely not if you're growing seed for market and for others to grow and passing it on. You really want your seed to be pure and to know exactly what's in there. So in this bin I have, that mixture of, there's some leaf material, there's some seed. It's easy for me to come in and shake it around. And seed is really dense. So what's naturally going to happen in here is the seed's going to go to the bottom, and the chaff, what we call the chaff, which is all the plant material, is going to rise to the top. And so I can come in and I can pick off the chaff. Especially these big pieces is really easy to pick off. So I'm cleaning it up now. And because there's some hulls for the seed, I'm going to just come in and give it a good massage to make sure that I don't have seed inside the hulls. And I can just kind of massage it around and squeeze out the seed. And kind of the same thing, I can come in now, shake it around, and I can put the whole material on here, and I can see, like, am I getting holes or am I getting a lot of seed too? Because sometimes it's experimenting and seeing, like, what's it look like. I don't really see any seed in there, so that's looking pretty good. So keep doing that a little bit. So that's one way that you can kind of clean up your seed and just keep whittling it down. Because we have these, helpful screens, I'm going to use them. And I'm going to try and find a screen that the Tulsi seed's going to fit through. The Tulsi seed is pretty small, and so it's going to take a little bit of a small screen, but I also don't want it to get stuck in the screen itself. So I'm going to take one that I believe is at least big enough, which will be this number 4 right here. And under the number 4, I'm going to put a screen that that can hold the seed, that the seed can't make it through, which is this number 7 here. And so then, throw that stuff out of here. I can come in and I can pour all the chaff and seed on there, and I can shake it around. And what's happening right now is all the seed is making it through the first screen, but it can't make it through the second screen. And what's staying on top is the bigger plant material particles. They can't pass through. So I just did a pretty quick cleaning to get all this stuff out of there. And then what's left is mostly seed with a little bit of chaff. What came through the bottom was some immature seed and some plant material, some dust, some like smaller fine plant material, which is pretty nice. And you can see some of the seeds are getting stuck in the screen there, so maybe I chose a screen that was a little too big for the bottom one, for the Tulsi. And I'm going to come back in the bowl so that we can evaluate what we have going on here. So now you can see mostly seed, a little bit of chaff sitting on top of there, and you can see how, like, I shake it around and the chaff, hopefully you can see, is really rising to the top. And one thing I can do is I can come in and blow. The seed's denser than the chaff, and so those like little flowers and pieces of plant material are going to blow out of there. So I can keep doing that, and you can see how it's getting cleaner and cleaner, the seeds, so that's a pretty quick process there. And another way is usually we use, right now we don't have any trade winds blowing, we're kind of in a Kona weather pattern, but when we have our trade winds, I'll often just pour from bowl to bowl. And that pouring, I can like hold it up a little bit higher, and I can actually use the wind to blow the flowers out. And if not that, I can come in and actually use my breath in a very controlled way so I don't blow too much seed out, and I'm just blowing the chaff out. And then even on here, I can see like, oh, that chaff rises to the top, I can pinch it off, and so it's just kind of a little by little process, whittling it down. Another way, you don't want to use your breath so much, there's no wind blowing, you can use a fan. So we have a box fan that we use, we'll set up the fan and we can just pour seed in front of the box fan. But again, you want to just make sure the setting isn't so much that it's blowing the seed away. With the Tulsi is a very light seed, so it's a little bit more delicate with the breath or with the fan if you're going to use it, or the trade winds for that matter. You've got to temper it on the right day. But usually we get our seed down to something like that, and we get a whole bunch processed, and then we wait for a nice trade wind day, and then we pull it all out and we winnow it in the wind. So some other examples I'll show you, which is really the same process, is we have some cilantro here. Again, finding a screen that the holes are big enough for the cilantro to pass through is really nice. And finding one under it that I know the seed is not going to pass through, but the little bits of dust can. And then I can come in, pour the seed on, shake it around, get rid of the the chaff. I can actually do it a couple times because I can see some pieces in there that will probably stay behind if I do it a second time. But we'll see. Yep, so I got some chaff left behind there. And then from here, I can go to the bowl and do my winnow process. Sometimes it looks like this. And it gets cleaner and cleaner, so I still have a little bit to go, but it doesn't take too long to do that. And just for the fun of it, we'll look at one more, which is I have some provider bush beans, which we also have available through Hawaii Seed Growers Network. And I actually don't have a screen big enough right now for the provider, so we're going to hold off on that. Actually, I can get some of the, at least the dust particles out and some of the bigger, or some of the leaf matter particles. And for these beans, the hardware cloth, a 1/2 inch hardware cloth is generally what I use. There's some seeds making it through here, but these seeds that are making it through are fairly small and actually don't look that viable. Like maybe they were a little bit immature. So from there I can kind of pick off some of the bigger stuff sitting on top. I can again go to the bowl with these beans, shake it around, and pick off the chaff from the top. But really the 1/2 inch hardware cloth will work really well for getting a lot of this chaff to be left on top and the beans to make it through. Alright, now let's look at some pigeon pea. So I brought back our pigeon pea. And all I've done so far is I've actually just pulled the beans off the pods, off some of the plant material. So a fairly easy process. If you're doing really large quantities, you don't even have to do this. You could just go straight to the second step that I'm about to do, which is the threshing process, which for these pods is a little bit different than just, you know, banging the whole plant around. Because the beans, the seeds aren't going to come out of the pod by me just banging it. So I'm going to like to pull them off, and then I can come in here and just break these up. You know, just kind of twist and break it all up. And ideally, if I did take a little bit of time for this to dry out a little bit more. Like right now there's a little bit of moisture still in the pod itself that I can feel. I can feel it on my hands just a little bit. But if I took the time to let it dry out a little bit, like hang it up or put it in a paper bag and really dry out, then this is really going to be crispy. And it's really just going to break apart so easily and save me the time of having to, you know, really open pods one by one, which is really what we're trying to avoid, is this, you know, tedious process. You know, one marker of a good, healthy farm community that I've always had is whether we have friends to come and sit on the porch and shuck beans with us. Particularly if we're eating them, you know, it's a process. But again, if we can just be in the like bulk process of just breaking it apart. I know I've seen indigenous communities in Costa Rica where they would get 50-pound sacks of pigeon pea as one of their main protein sources for legume, and they would take these 50-pound sacks and run over them with the car or the tractor and just go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth to break the hulls off. And they would make sure that it was really dry, so this stuff would just crack apart and break apart into little pieces. So there's all sorts of creative ways that we can utilize to open seed. And like most things in farming, seed saving's the same, which is just having that innovation. And mostly that innovation tends to be low technology, because these are ancient practices that we're still utilizing today. Alright, so for the sake of demonstration purposes, I think we have enough peas to work with in here. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to just kind of shake it around. The peas are all floating to the bottom. I can come in and I can move stuff off the top and down in the bottom there. You can see a little pile of peas. You can see we have a few different varieties of pigeon pea. 3 different colors. One that's almost black, and then this tan one, and then a little bit of a purplish. And hopefully I have enough to work with what I'm going to show you guys next. But I'm going to grab a bowl. Yeah, so having all sorts of tools like little bowls and colanders. I've used spaghetti strainers to strain seeds. So if you don't have these fancy screens, check your kitchen and see what you have. And if you are going to scale up, then it kind of is worthwhile to get more materials to make the process more efficient. So I still have some dirty seed here. I've showed you the process of using screens to clean this. It'd be pretty quick to clean this with screen because it's such a small amount. But if you're using really large lots of seed, if we start really scaling up, and particularly for here in Hawaii, as a farmer, I buy a lot of seed from the mainland, and it'd be really nice if we had more and more varieties locally produced to feed our community, so that we can have localized seed stock, locally adapted seed to our soils and our climate conditions. And at the moment, it's mostly small lots that we're doing, and these processes can take time, even though it's fairly quick. But when we scale up, there's this machine I'm going to show you guys over here. You probably have seen it in the background, but it's called a clipper. It's been around since 1891, so this is actually some pretty old technology. It is essentially does essentially what a combine does. So it cleans seed and winnows it, and what results is nice clean seed is what comes out. Is the idea. Just going to grab another bowl over here. You can see the theme around the importance of having bowls available. But what this thing has, if you turn it on, and what's happening right now is on the inside of the machine, there's 2 screens. And they're moving like this. Back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. What I have in here is screens that are specifically for the size of a pigeon pea seed. And the top screen that we're using resembles more this one, but the holes are big enough for the pigeon pea seed to go through. But bigger leaf matter, like bigger leaf stuff, isn't going to make it through, and the pigeon seed will make it through. And then there's a screen under it that's a smaller diameter circle, and on that one the pigeon pea can't make it through, but all the chaff can. And then from there, all the pigeon pea rolls into a little channel, and in that channel it drops down, and on its way down there's actually a kind of like a turbine in here that spins and creates air. And what's happening is, as it drops down, any chaff that's left in the seed blows up into this area and out of the machine. So it screens, and it winnows. The one thing it doesn't do for us is thresh, so we're responsible for the threshing. But what it looks like is I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to pour the seed in here. This has a very simple low-tech device that this piece of wood moves, so I can set it at a depth that the seed will make it through easily, but any big chaff, like if I still had pods in here, will be left behind. I'll turn the machine off, we'll see how it did. So one is there's this little extra slot here that sometimes if the machine gets overwhelmed, like we put too much seed in at once, or things just roll fully off the screen, because even though the holes are big enough for the seed to go through, there's still the spaces in between the holes, and so seeds can find their way, leaves can find their way. So it has kind of a recycling chamber that will drop things back that can then go through again. And you can see, I mean, this is a tiny lot of seed. Usually I'd be using this machine when we have like pounds and pounds of seed to process. And then the seed itself drops down into this little chamber down here. And you can see, comes out nice and clean. So next up, we're going to take a look at some tomato processing. And this is an example of wet seed cleaning. Tomatoes, I'm choosing tomatoes because tomatoes are a little bit unique in that they have a gelatinous coating over them that actually has in it a chemical compound that prevents the seed from sprouting. And with that in mind, we need to actually remove that coating for the longevity of the seed, particularly for seed storage. If you're going to plant it right away, you can plant it right away. See, probably if you're gardening already and you grow tomatoes, you're used to seeing a lot of volunteer tomato plants popping up from the seed. Even our worm bin, is one of the places that we don't put tomatoes because they don't digest the seeds, and then we end up using it and the seeds sprout up. But what it needs is a fermentation process to remove that gelatinous coating. And so I'm going to come in here and just take the seed, and I'm just going to squeeze it. Into this container. And this is a cherry tomato. I'm actually not sure we're not really going to save this seed for the network, but I'm not sure what variety this is, but we grow about 6 varieties of tomatoes, heirloom tomatoes, that are on the seed network. And they're all cherries. We grow cherries because they don't have the same pests as the larger tomatoes, which is really nice. And we grow them in the field. And these varieties we've been stewarding for the past, say 10 years or so, 12 years that I've been growing these varieties year after year. And they've generally done really well for us, which is really nice. We started with maybe 12 varieties of heirlooms and whittled it down to the ones that really wanted to grow where we are. So it's a little bit of a messy, slimy process. And if you're working with things like cucumber, or eggplant, or peppers, or really anything, you want to make sure that the fruit's nice and mature before you harvest it. So you can see these tomatoes are nice and red. We want that like bright red. We don't want anything immature. It's kind of the wisdom of age. You know, as things age, they get more and more wisdom in there in their DNA, and we want that wisdom of anything that it gleans for its evolutionary cycle in the soil. Shooting myself up the nose with tomato seed. And with cucumbers, you know, what it looks like when a cucumber's ready, it's going to be yellow. And when an eggplant's ready, it's going to start turning like a brownish yellow. Most varieties, depending on the color of the variety. Peppers, just in their most mature state, is when we want to harvest the seed. So a lot of these things, it's past the time of them being able to eat, or us being able to eat them. They're going to be a little bit bitter, even for us to eat. The cherry tomatoes, these are prime for eating at this phase. But for a lot of those other seed crops, all we're doing is we're cutting them in half, and we're removing the seed. You know, usually with a spoon, removing the seed, maybe giving it a rinse to clean off any extra debris, and putting it through a colander. You know, putting it on a colander and rinsing it off. And then usually I'll use screens, just like our seed saving screens right here. I'll just spread the seed on the screen and let it dry out. You know, put it in a place out of the sunshine, but where there's kind of good airflow to happen, because you don't want it to mold. I'll usually come in every day and just spread it around, move it around, just so that it can dry out nice and even. But you get the picture on this tomato seed. I'm going to keep going on this and finish this batch. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a cloth and I'm going to cover it. So what that'll look like is just putting, you know, a little towel over it, a rubber band here, so that I have airflow, because the airflow is important. And but what I don't want, so I don't want to suffocate it, but I also don't want to let flies in. And the reason I want the airflow is because what I'm doing is I'm culturing a fungus and bacteria on here that will remove that seed coat. So after I leave this for a few days, we'll revisit it, we'll come back. Once it has a little bit of a coat of fungus that I can see on the top, I'm going to take that, put it in a colander, pour it into the colander, blast it out with the hose, really clean the seed, spread the seed out on the screen, and let it dry. And then it will be ready for storage to get dried down a little bit further in our lab, and then stored until people are ready to plant it. So thanks. All right, here we are back. It's 2.5 days later, and we have our tomatoes that have been sitting out fermenting. So we can come take a look at what it looks like on the inside of here. And you can see that there's a good bit of fungus on there. It's molded. Usually I'd probably wait another 12 hours or so. But for the sake of demonstration, we'll just continue on. In that next 12 hours, probably what would happen is that fuzz would spread over the entire top of the tomatoes. And I have a trusty colander here, just a little colander from the kitchen. It says Tommy 2 on it, which is the variety of tomatoes that we're cleaning right now. And so, coming on in, and I'm gonna pour the tomatoes onto the strainer. I'm gonna look in there, see if I got all the seed. I can see there's a little bit of seed left in there. And so I'll spray it out just to get most of the seeds. And you can already see that the seeds look different than the tomato seeds that we eat because they don't have that gelatinous coating. And so that's already come off of the seed. I can just spray it down in the colander. Get it nice and clean. You can see there's a little beetle there or something that I could get out of there. And that looks like a layer of fungus. So I got them nice and clean. I'm going to work that beetle out of there. And then I have the seed on the colander and I can just spread it out And I can even let it dry on the colander. I can use a cloth on the back side to get some of that moisture out of there initially. But what I'll do is I'll just spread it out. It could be on a bigger screen if we have more tomato seed, like our seed cleaning screens. Spread it out, keep it in a nice, cool, dry place out of the sun. And I could even come in tomorrow and spread the seed around a little bit. So just keep mixing it up so that it evenly dries all around. And I'll probably wait for about, I don't know, 5 to 7 days or so to let it dry down before sending it into the lab, where they'll dry it down even more. So that is seed cleaning basics, some seed cleaning basics for y'all. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it and are enjoying the weekend. Aloha.